Hello, Web 2 students. Welcome to our lecture on DHTML, which is dynamic HTML. What is DHTML? Well, it's not a whole nother code base that you have to learn like HTML and CSS, JavaScript, PHP, or whatnot. It's a strategy. It's not a new set of code. It's using the kinds of code that we already use in a different way, combining them so that we can make things jump around on the page. We use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to make this all work. Generally speaking, it works something like this. You make an element in HTML, for instance, a headline, which we've ID'd A. You write a little bit of CSS for the element. You can see here for ID A, we gave that font family of times and a font size of 1 point, which seems really tiny, but you get the hang of this in a minute. Now comes the fun part. We have to write a JavaScript loop, just like we did for the slideshow. Only this time, instead of swapping out images, we're going to change the CSS for that headline tag A. So suppose we want to make the font size of the letter A grow. Since we started out at 0.1 or 1 point, it would make sense that we'd want it to grow up to a size where we could see it. We need a way to refer to the CSS while in JavaScript. So let's remember we had an H1 tag which we've ID'd A, and we put the letter A in it. And we wrote a little CSS. The important part is that the font size there is 1 point. So if we wanted to alter the font size, we could write a line of JavaScript that looks like this. Document get element by ID A, just like the A up here. Oh, let's go back. Well, we can work with this one. Style font size equals X plus points. Let's bust that down a little bit. Notice what we have here in red. This is new code we haven't looked at before. We have style, which points to the style sheet that's attached to whatever element we've talked about in get element by ID. So in this case, the headline tag ID'd A, we're going to dip into its style sheet. And we're going to look for the font size property, and that's the property that we're going to change. Now notice the difference in the naming convention between CSS and JavaScript. In CSS, we'd go font dash size, but in JavaScript, we have to use the camel case, font capital S size all squished together. So now let's make a loop. You remember the slideshow function? All we have to do is tweak that line of JavaScript where we actually do something. So here was our original function. We set X to 0, that was our counter. We did a variable Y, which we used later to stop our slideshow. Then we made a function which did a test for X is less than or equal to 4. And then our line of JavaScript that really counts is we took the source of the image tag for the slide and we kept changing the source. Then we incremented X by 1. And then we put an else statement so that when X gets over 4, X sets back to 0 so the slideshow repeats over and over. And then we do the set timeout for my slide at 3000 milliseconds, which is 3 seconds. We're going to take that very same function, and we're just going to tweak a few lines of it to do what we want to do here. For starters, that middle line, instead of the get element by ID, my slide, source equals, we've swapped it out for style font size equals. We've got our style, font size, then it's going to be equal to whatever our value of X is. So this is what our new improved function is going to look like. You notice first thing we did is we created the variable X and set its value at 1, because in our CSS, you'll notice we started at 1 point. So we want to start X at 1 as well. Next thing we do is we gave this function its own name. It didn't make sense to talk about the slideshow. So we call this one text grow. Notice the camel case. Now notice here in our counter, our test, I made X less than or equal to 125. We've got to count a whole lot more numbers to get that point size up to the point where you're going to be able to see the text grow. So I figure 1 point to 125 points is probably a pretty good increment. Now down here we don't need an else statement because we don't want this thing to repeat over and over and over. We only want the text to grow once and then stop. And then we do a set timeout. Don't forget to change the function name here, because in the old function it was, the slideshow name. And then we want to set our delay much, much, much faster. We want to be able to see this text grow. We don't want it to step 1 point at a time every 3 seconds. We'll be there forever watching the thing grow. And that's the end of the slideshow on this. Let me show you what the code's actually going to look like. I wrote a prototype page here for you, and let's step through that. Notice down here the first thing I did is I made an H1 tag with the ID of A, and I put a capital A in it. Up here we have a button, but of course that's just going to be used to launch the JavaScript. So let's go up to our head. I did an internal style sheet with this because it was small, it kept it all together, and it was easier to lecture by. So you notice for ID equals A, I just set up a font family times and a font size 1 point, and then I went ahead and aligned the text center. On button, I did do a display equals block just so that I wouldn't have to do a break tag down here at the end of this. Then I launched right into my JavaScript. And notice, just like in the PowerPoint, first thing I do is make a variable x equal to 1. And I create a new function called growText. Now notice here on my test, I went x less than or equal to 500. I found by playing push and pull with the function that 500 point text is a lot more visible on the screen. It makes a little more of a wow than 125 point text did. So I had it go from 1 to 500. Now here's the money line. Document get element by ID, style, font size equals whatever our number of x is. And then remember when we do the plus, and then we do these letters in quote marks, we've now done an entire string that is going to be this number point. And so indeed font size will equal whatever number x is point. Then down here at the increment, notice I incremented x not by 1, but by 10. What I found was x equals x plus 1. This loop cycles 500 times. It's slow and very jerky no matter how quickly I set the timeout. So by having it jump 10 points at a time, I got a little cleaner, smoother effect out of it. Likewise, down here at the set timeout, we run growText, but I'm setting the speed to 5 milliseconds, so it moves rather quickly. Now when you do this on your own, whether you're making text grow, whether you're making a move across a screen, whether you're changing colors of a graphic, you're going to experiment with the timeout, the delay, and the increment to find the magic combination that gives you the change you're looking for, the speed you're looking for, and the smoothness of the animation you're looking for. And with this one, I found that this just about hits. And then we close the function, close the script, and notice down here in the button, I have my on-click growText, and that's what's going to launch our function. And when we load it up in a browser, here's what it looks like. That's kind of cool. I don't know what you'd ever use it for, but it's kind of cool. And that's the lecture on dynamic HTML. In the next lecture, we're going to use these concepts further to make lines of text run across the top of the page like a news ticker. Thank you.